My friend, today I'm sitting with someone who I recently met. His name is Adam W. Barney. He's a coach, author of Make Your Own Glass Half Full. Did I say your last name correctly?
You did. It's like Barney the dinosaur, or if
Barney
you
the dinosaur. Okay, cool.
the Flintstones, Barney Rubble, right? So
All right, cool. All right, I'm going to start over, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't ask before we got going. Okay. Welcome back to the show, my friends. Today I'm sitting down with my friend Adam Barney. He's a coach, author of Make Your Own Glass Half Full, and he's a powerhouse behind helping founders, leaders, and creatives stay fueled in high-stake environments. This is something really cool I want to talk deeply about today. In a world, of course, overwhelmed by burnout and expectations, you guys see it everywhere online. Adam offers a refreshing lens through this idea of empowered optimism in an actionable, sort of autonomous way. So we're going to explore that framework behind his work, the real stories that shaped it, and the advice he has for fellow authors and creators and leaders navigating not only uncertain times, but the process of bringing a book to life. Adam, thank you so much for joining me, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Awesome, Zane. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man. This is great. So you and I briefly met over on LinkedIn. I think you were like sort of engaging with some of my work, and we started tossing back some messages, and I was like, man, why don't you just come on the show? I think you have some insights here that I'd love for people to know about, especially when you shared about your book, which was all about optimism. And I've always had this like urge to be overly optimistic. I came from a refugee camp. So in my eyes, I'm like, I don't know, there's green grass outside. Like everything's okay. Like there's water. I don't live in a tent. So I've always had this like lens. It's a perspective that we look through, right? But I want to know a little bit about sort of how you approach that work. So let's start with that concept, empowered optimism. How do you define it? How does it differ from the kind of blind positivity we often see promoted online?
Yep. I mean, there's definitely that balance of optimism and toxic optimism that's a huge difference, right? And I actually get into it in part of one of the early chapters of my book where I'm setting up the idea of optimism. But, it's one of those useful tools when you keep it balanced with the realism of the situation that you're facing or the challenge that you're facing. It's a hugely important tool. It's basically, I love, how you mentioned coming from a refugee camp. I also loved in the book, distilling down stories across, hundreds, if not thousands of years of experiences in human existence where people use the tools of not just optimism, but optimism combined with autonomy, which I think they're two things that really tie together very cleanly and support one with the other. I actually go down to thinking about them in a two-layered toolbox, right? If you think of that toolbox you carry around your house, when you open it up, you've got that top level that you pull off to get to the bottom level. So when you unlock that optimism and then you balance the autonomy into it, which is that self-determination, that self-efficacy, that is the game changer. But when you lean too much again, and as you mentioned, into that toxic optimism, that can just allow you to, no matter what challenge you're facing, you're going to think everything is shiny gold, or dogs and ponies, right? When ultimately you need a little bit of a balance of the realism to ground yourself, not to overwhelm yourself.
I love that, man. That's the grounding is what I have like always tethered my optimism to, is like the grounding of my current reality. It's like, if you think too far into the future, like, yeah, of course you can have like, you can think optimistically in the future and all that stuff. If you think too far in the past, like, again, you can extract optimism from that. It's like things you've overcome, things you've, but like today, it's like, what can I be optimistic about today? Like, how can I really leverage both those experiences? Because let's be real, like right now is the thing that matters. So how do I see that? What are the tools, I guess, that you share in your book? With someone out there right now, like, I'll be honest with you. A couple of days ago, I got a message from a friend. He's like, man, I'm feeling a little lost. I'm feeling a little drained, a little burned out. And I'm sure you get those kinds of messages all the time, and I felt the urge to immediately give him a call, which I did. Yep. And I was just kind of loving on my friend. And I was like, look, dude, what's going on with you right now? Like, what are you super grateful for just like right now, like forget everything. That's how I like to start those conversations. How do you approach those moments and conversations?
You know what I mean? So as a coach, and of course I have an energy coaching practice where, as you mentioned, I work with executive and emerging leaders who are ready to make, high impact on the world, lead with energy, clarity, and resilience. It comes down to things just like you mentioned, right? It's mindset, it's momentum, it's meaningful action. There's also a piece of it that I think comes into play, and it gets typically talked about in a religious context, but the idea of grace, right? The idea of it's okay. A lot of us, I think, especially in this modern world with how fast things move, I see this even with entrepreneurs and founders that I coach. They're thinking about 3 million priorities at once. That's not sustainable, and it depends what you're dealing with. It's also not just about the professional side, it's about the holistic nature of the human. And you got into that with your story about your friend, but it's stepping back enough to understand where people are coming from. What are they dealing with? You know what I mean? We're all onions, right? And it takes time to peel back the different layers of the onion to get to the center of it. And then it's spring here in Boston, you go plant that and you've got, the start of your own onion plant, right? When you put it out there. But that takes time. That takes really, one of the key things is the resilience part of it, right? I've faced it through my own journey. I tell this story in the book where, I spent over 20 years in a nonlinear corporate marketing career. And through that experience, I had some fantastic opportunities across venture capital backed startups all the way to global companies like Microsoft and Akamai Technologies. But I was laid off twice in that career. And, the first time it happened, I tell this story in the book. I honestly was working for Microsoft. We were in a WeWork here in Boston because, fun fact, it's actually cheaper to rent space in a WeWork, at least as of that point in time, than it is to rent space back from Microsoft corporate. That's kind of a funny thing to realize.
Yeah.
But stepped out on that street. It was a sunny August day here in Boston, hopped on the subway back home. At that point in my life, we only had one dog at home. And I surprised him by being home early, took him on a walk around our local park, which is an incredible resource here. It's actually designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park, and took him on a walk around that. And by the time I got home, I said, this is something that knocked me down for a second, but it's going to be okay. It's a sunny day, but even if the sun was behind the clouds on that day, the sun is still there somewhere, and you just have to wait a little bit. So even tying back to your friend, it's giving yourself that grace that if you didn't knock it out of the park today, that's okay. Yeah. Come back with those 1, 2, 3 things on your to-do list that are your biggest priority. If you get one of them done, go for it. So, that's a piece of it. The other part that can help recharge, I think, and one of the big keys in the toolbox that's also there, it's about small wins. How simple is it to go, no matter what position you are in terms of income or what your situation is, go to a convenience store or somewhere around the corner, pick up a tiny 99-cent notebook. That's something that always can fit in your back pocket. And when you experience a success, pull that out, jot it down quickly, and then you've got that small wins booklet that you can rely upon in those dark times. The world has a negative viewpoint on so many different things, but if you have that reminder that you can keep close to you, that can re-energize you. That can give you that perspective that the resilience is there. You're going to be okay. Pick that back up. Try again.
Man, that's so beautiful. I love that. I do it every day in my little notebook. I generally just start with, I just write at the top of it. I am grateful for being here right now. And it just brings me back to right now. And, and when when I'm deeply in my writing practice, just the gratitude stuff, or just like writing my thoughts, or just writing a little to-do list, just like getting out of my head.
Yep.
And then the times that I don't do that, or I go a couple of days without, I'm like, oh, I can just wing it. Man, I just feel the difference. Literally, I can just feel the difference of my day and how I feel. And it's so interesting how writing those things down, wins, losses, challenges, whatever, just getting them out of your body and onto a piece of paper, that transfer of energy is so powerful. So I'm so glad you went there, which leads us to sort of this urge to bring it all together in a book, the process of writing a book. So I want to talk a little bit about, you've obviously transitioned through, corporate world, tech, all that good stuff, into coaching and mentorship and guidance, with this lens of optimism, which I think is a huge need right now, because you're right. Sadly, the world, for some ridiculous reason, views things, and that world, like meaning our planet, meaning people on this planet, view things a little negatively, and it charges people in a different way. And that also has an energy. But I believe, like you said, like optimism is sort of a remedy. It's a way, it's like honey for your sore throat, right? Like, I just feel that those two go together, but it's a practice, it's a muscle that you sort of have to really train and like develop. So is writing, and really trusting yourself. And it's not about, am I a good writer, or am I going to misspell stuff, but like writing for the sake of writing to get it out there. What was your journey like? Obviously you've written quite a bit, but what was your journey like from sort of going into the coaching world and then starting to write this book?
Sure. It's really it's fascinating, and the thing that I'll frame this up by saying, just by the end of that Hussein, is nothing is ever perfect in this world. Nothing is truly perfect, and I think that ties back to that grace sentiment, right? Of just go and start. There's resilience required, but that go and act, that go and start the process is the game changer, and then resilience is the difference to success, right? So those things tie together. But in terms of writing the book, it's a fascinating journey. I actually intentionally left the corporate world after 20 years. I have two young daughters right now. They're 8 and 5 years old. A year into COVID, Labor Day of 2021, my wife and I escaped from a crazy household. Now we have 2 dogs, not just one in the house as well. We escaped from this chaotic, controlled chaos is what I like to call it, in this household, to a beach in Mexico with friends from the West Coast over Labor Day of 2021. And that gave me enough headspace to step away and reflect. And I actually wrote my resignation letter to leave the corporate world on that plane flying back to Boston, away from that, 3 nights away from just the chaos that I'm in. So talk about the clarity of mind that we get when we take ourselves out of our normal place, or the stereotypical place where we're sitting. That can allow us to open up the opportunity to reflect. But honestly, I stepped out of that corporate world. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to take a big swing. The first time I was laid off, I built a boutique marketing agency. I wanted to take a bigger swing at changing the world. I didn't know what that looked like yet. So I ended up diving into my superpower, which is how we first met, which is networking. And I think everyone in this world, no matter where you come from, what your background, family experience, history, education is, we have a superpower that sits within inside of ourselves. We just have to spend the time to look inward to discover what it is. Mine has always been networking, and it's genuine, authentic networking that just doesn't only lead to connections. It drives towards collisions, almost at a particle science level, that fuse different things together. So in that first year after leaving the corporate world, I really, in the still the depths of early COVID days, dug into that. And I was having 3 to 7 30-minute coffee chat conversations with new people I had organically met almost every single day within that first year of leaving the corporate world. And I've always felt, even going back in my corporate career, I worked in big global ad agencies, right? So I've been working with remote teams and remote people, going back to the days of not having tools like this or tools like Zoom available,
Right.
the phone in the middle of the conference room table, AOL Instant Messenger to communicate with employees. It's a
Yeah.
different world to come from, but
Yeah.
I've always felt that ability to connect across the organizations that I've been in, and that led me to building that network and growing that network through those conversations. And actually, in the last role, the second to last role I'll say that I had in the corporate world, I was leading global demand marketing for Akamai Technologies, working in a center of excellence position. And that was, yes, it was performance marketing and driving pipeline revenue for the business, but it was about building relationships across a global organization. So that led into that networking push that I got into, and it just opened up all of these different doors. I also, went through a business accelerator program with Morning Brew. I was part of the first cohort of that in early 2021. That opened me up to an incredible network of 3,000 like-minded entrepreneurial mindset global alumni. And when you bring that intentionality, the same intentionality across a community, it drives up that energy. That's an incredible, incredible network to have. I also, in the journey to launching my coaching, went through a 12-week climate change learning for action fellowship with an organization called Terra Do. So talk about another incredible community that comes together where you've got thousands of like-minded people with that same intention connected by the internet coming together. That energy, that power, it blooms. It's that's a
Right.
gigantic collision to bring to change the world, make it a more just and equitable place. And I just continue to dive into that. So that's, and really what it comes down to is I was reflecting in the early days of becoming a manager in my corporate career back to how I always hired and approached, managing teams. And I always felt like I was, number one, it was about, I've had terrible managers who put you on a downward cycle. I've also had incredible leaders who lift you up and elevate you. I was lucky enough in my time at Microsoft to work under a leader like Satya Nadella, who's an incredible person that has developed this ability across hundreds of thousands of persons organization to allow the sage leadership energy that he holds to drip down within the organization. That's an incredible power, even as the tiniest needle in a haystack, to start to pick up on. But I always hired those early teams. It was about them succeeding in the role that I hired them for, but I always wanted to elevate them to the next role and then the role after that. That was always my mission: upward trajectory, giving them the tools as long as they're moldable and they're open to learning to just succeed. And it's also about transparency, right?
Yeah. Man, that's so powerful. You have had a journey going through all these things, but so many learning steps, right? Like so many, one thing leads to another, and opens up doors, keeping yourself open to these opportunities of networking. And that leads to all kinds of growth, which is fantastic. So in your sort of, like I get approached a lot with authors and I work, quite a bit with experts and things like that. And, a lot of them have this like nagging feeling of like, someone who is like who am I to write this, right? Like who am I as a person with all this wisdom, whatever, right? And they kind of struggle with the optimistic perspective of not only who are they, but what they actually have to offer, right? And so that's kind of the switch. But like, how have you approached that when people come to you, whether they're experts, leaders, creatives who struggle with who am I to pursue X, to pursue writing a book, to pursue leading a huge team or Fortune 500 or whatever it is, right? How do you approach that?
I mean, part of it is thinking about those people who are leading these, the Fortune 50 level organizations, outside of, having whatever support when they started, right? They had to start somewhere low on the totem pole. They had to work through that. So I think what you're getting into, it's traditionally known as imposter syndrome, right? Why am I the one who's open to writing this? And I've always loved to think in more of a growth mindset. Personally, I've always been driven and this is, I don't think the way most people in the world work. I've always been driven by my own internal self-determination and my self-efficacy rather
Mm.
than outside competition,
Yeah.
and that's become increasingly the way that it's worked in my mind as I've gone through the decades of growing. I turned 42 in September of last year.
Ooh.
I'm at a place where, I've stopped worrying about what other people think, and I'm trying to make the world a more progressive place, which a lot of people get older and they start to take their foot off the pedal for that, right?
Right, right, right.
But in terms of coaching, people and bringing people through that, it's about that self-understanding. It's about that again, going back to grace, just that opportunity to say you have a unique lived experience that you can build from here.
Mm.
That's your unique place to come from. Even
Mm.
to kind of flip it's on its head, and I talk about Ikigai, the Japanese concept for a reason for being, in my book. That ties together what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And when you sit truly in the center of that vision, you can do no wrong to yourself. That's an honest place to come from. But that also is the flip side to writing a book, or the why me? Why should I be able to do this? Because if you sit in the center of that, it achieves what you're looking to get to, no matter how much it doesn't feel like the right thing to do. It's interesting in my own book writing journey. I stumbled into, and just for people here to realize, I leveraged a hybrid publisher for my first book, which is Make Your Own Glass Half Full: The Path to Empowered Optimism and Autonomy. And I had this idea that must have been in the back of my head for decades that I wanted to bring to the forefront. And I, through my network, had this conversation set up with the owner of this hybrid publishing company. And within about 5 minutes of being on that call with that owner of the hybrid publishing company, I had the Make Your Own Glass Half Full. I had that title in my mind. It just took
Wow.
5 minutes of him, sort of a little bit of grooming there to say that was the reality. So this underserves the entire book writing process, honestly. But I stepped into that. I had the title. I came in with that hybrid publishing accountability support with a positioning specialist. That positioning specialist, I had to bring my chapter outline to. And honestly, the book that's on the shelves right now has the same 12 chapters that I laid out in about 20 minutes in that positioning meeting. So it underserves the process, but in my self-driven, self-efficacy mindset, it felt almost like paint by number. I
Yeah.
had to fill in the
Yeah.
word count goals that I needed to hit to get this done by X date. I
Mm.
drove that train by myself because I like that self-driven challenge. But it became that simple, at least for my book writing journey. And then it turned that mindset away from, I don't have anything important to say. And honestly, that first draft of the book, I mentioned earlier, nothing is perfect. That
Yeah.
first draft of the book felt like gobbledygook. You know what I mean? It was very not refined, but that's the point. It's about
Yeah.
getting the words on the page. It's
Mhm.
not about them being perfect, right through. And there are a couple tools that I found incredibly powerful in that book writing process as well, that I'd be happy to mention, but I'm happy to pause
Right.
there for a second.
Yeah. No, man, that's so powerful. I'm glad you brought it back to sort of your writing process and sort of what happens in that journey, because it's something that all authors go through, of course, right? You kind of have this idea, it starts to brew throughout your career, and there's like a missing few elements, especially as you get deeper into your own career. And then, especially as you start to lean into potentially starting your consulting or coaching or anything, you're like, man, I have these ideas, and they're at this point like a formula in a way that you maybe even practicing, you just don't know you're practicing. And so when you sit with someone who can help you publish a book and get, they're going to, of course, try to help you extract those ideas and formulate them into a jumble at first. And then from there, there's golden nuggets that then become sort of the structure of the book. And from there, you can further advance and write the thing and get it out to the world. So you've done a great job doing that. Of course, you went through the publishing world. Again, I think they're all similar in whether it's traditional, hybrid, or whatever. You still have to do the work of the overcoming of the, should I write this? Should I put that story in there? All that good stuff. But then, of course, when you work with a good editor, they help you refine those elements.
Right.
But you're right in that the thing that you're pursuing needs to be, you need to take action. You need to take one action after the other and just do not stop the momentum and don't get in your own way.
Right.
So with that, how did you start to use your book? So now that you have it published and it's out in the world, what was your original intention of, I want to create this book and help people? But was there, especially in the positioning timing, in comparison to where you are today, how do you use your book to help your authorpreneurship, if you will? So as an author, as a small business owner, of course, you got family, all these things. There's a lot of people out there with books. How do you intend, or how have you used your book to help you, grow your business?
I mean, this is a kind of funny thing probably to pause and mention. With 2 young kids, it's a fantastic time capsule, right? For them to have as something that they can put on their bookshelf. I also, earlier this year in January, the audiobook went live. I recorded the audiobook. Talk about a time capsule, right? For the kids to go back to. But to more fully answer your question across a broader realm, as I launched my coaching practice, excuse me, a few years ago, I always wondered, I have a lot of coaches within my network who went down the path of IPEC or ICF certification. And I always had this pull in my mind of, that's not the right move for me. And I never was able to figure out exactly what it was until a really formative conversation with another coach about 18 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I realized, I don't want this certification. I don't want to regurgitate what someone else has put out in the world. And I guess it's probably, ultimately driven again by that self-determination. I have something I can build off of here. So the book almost worked as not a credibility piece of that puzzle of building this coaching practice, but it allowed me, one, to build a more formalized framework to work within for my business. And then number 2, it's a tool that I can bring as an alternative to that certification to the forefront. It's opened up doors. I've brought copies of it to events that I've been to. I travel with a couple generally everywhere I go that I can hand out to people. It's a great tool to elevate the Adam W. Barney brand and bring that to a different level of, I'm never going to approach the Tony Robbins scale, of course, within my coaching practice, but it's to get that number 1 idea of what an energy coach is out there to the world. And then number 2, the brand name of Adam W. Barney. It's a critical tool in that entire process. And it's brought, media coverage. It brings conversations like this together. It also opens up doors in that networking opportunity to meet different people and establish relationships with a whole set of different people, whether they're other authors. For instance, next week, I'm going to an event that's called Agents of Change, that's organized by an organization out of the West Coast called All Raise, that's about changing the game for women and diverse founders, connecting with venture capital and investment to help support their entrepreneurial ideas. Last year at that event, I met someone who was just about at the same stage of getting her book out there to the world. And she's one of the top leaders at the SEC. You know what I mean? So talk about an incredible person. Marsha Daywood is her name. An incredible person to bring into your network just because you're working on the same sort of a thing. And talk about that imposter syndrome creeping up. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my gosh, it's someone who works for the SEC. That's a whole different level of validation. And then I had to go back inside myself and say, hey, you've worked across these global companies in really critical roles. You've driven this change across venture capital and startup environments. You've coached hundreds of micro business owners across the US. that's all validation that allows you to do this, and that's okay. And then the slippery slope on it, of course, is, oh, I've done it once. It's like riding a bike. Now I want to write a second book. And there are about 3 other book ideas that are in the back of my brain. They're not all in the same realm of the first book.
Sure.
The second one I want to work on, I think, honestly, reaches a little bit more of a broad audience compared to the first book.
Sure.
But I've got one about, a nasty neighbor and a easement issue in a real estate situation that I would love to write to bring out to the world, because it's a very interesting story that was built on about 5 years of an increasingly difficult experience over real estate. You know what I mean? But it's something that I think it would actually help me process it a little bit.
Right.
If I get it out there to the world. And, transformative tools in my writing process, one of the biggest ones that I stumbled across when I was early in that drafting process, I was going through, think about the author 100 years ago sitting at a typewriter. Now we sit at these computer screens and we're typing, but you've got idea in your head. It has to get translated through your body to your fingertips. And then you hit that keyboard and you've got spell check, you've got Grammarly, you've got notifications popping up. That was a disruptive process in my writing process. I was having trouble reaching those word count goals because it would turn into getting, maybe 250 words on a page when I knew I needed to get about 3,000 more words down in the next 10 days. Just through building a network, I ended up running into this entrepreneur whose name is Luis Pereira, who started a platform called AudioPen. And I started using this tool. It's an incredibly powerful writing tool, no matter what you're trying to do, though, because it allows you to not just speak into it and have it transcribed, but it uses machine learning to unfuzzy the language. And I realized something that my wife has helped me realize is that I can be obtuse. I can talk in circles. When I use that AudioPen tool, I could use that to speak it out and then have it cleaned up. It's still draft, and it's not AI from an additive tool. It's AI from an iteration and a curation tool. It made that stream of consciousness into a much more architected form that fit into filling those word count goals. And then, of course, you've got all the layers. I pull in a lot of positive psychology work that goes back to people like Martin Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology. Then I needed to go back and fill in the pieces of the supporting evidence and citations and do that song and dance to build that story to be a little bit more cohesive about how those tools of optimism and autonomy come together in the world.
That's so cool, man. It's such a deep and enriched experience to extract what's on your mind and bring it into the world through writing. And again, whatever tool you're using, especially in this scenario, right? Like we're so advanced now. Like you can speak to it, you can write it, you can do a video, and it'll do transcription. You can literally you can approach it in any way, and then the reverse happens. So how we consume content in general is also either by ear or by sight or by just watching articles, your scroll feed, all that stuff is happening and it's coming at you fast. But a book, sitting down with a book in any way, shape, or form, really, just that condensed wisdom of somebody's life and stories and ideas, I felt complete, it was so cathartic to write my story. So cathartic, which helps you lead to what you really want to say next or what you really want to say after that, which is so powerful.
Right.
So I'm glad you got there. What's one thing that you wish you would have known before, during, or after writing your book?
I mean, after writing the book, there's no magic bullet with it, right? You know what I mean? I come from a deep marketing background. It's hard to market a book. It's a crowded marketplace, even though, 10% of the people in the world start writing a book. Only, out of those, 83% never finish writing the book. It's still an incredibly dense marketplace to work through. So, I've understood in building 2 businesses now, being an entrepreneur, writing this book, I'm in the early stages of launching my own podcast series that's going to be called Founders Failures, right?
Very cool.
That's about not knowing. It's about just acting, and then you need to figure it out as you go. But it's also about finding those partners. I like to coach people and coach founders, entrepreneurs, micro business owners, and say, find a board of advisors, right? These aren't just your people that you met, 5 minutes ago. These are people who you grew up with, friends from college, whatever the case might be, who know you a little bit deeper and can kind of understand that Ikigai that's inside of you and use those. It should be maybe 5 at the most. Generally, it's like 2 or 3 people that you rely upon to make sure that your ship is pointed in the right direction and you're not going too far off course.
Yes. Love that. Yeah, I love that, man. Being surrounded by people who know you, but also see you deeply and understand where your real things are. And sometimes you don't like to expose those things to like people, like you said 5 minutes ago, but like I have my core friends, from high school, college that, I'm always tapping their shoulders. I'm like, man, tell me about it. Give it to me raw. You know what I mean? Like give me the raw picture.
They'll also challenge you, right? You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yes.
I have because I know I have my own blinders just like anyone else in this world. I love those people who come in and challenge me, and even using some of these AI tools, they're so agreeable to what you're trying to do. I like to go back and say, can you poke holes in this? Like, where are the gaps within this? That's the way. It even goes back to my early corporate marketing days, though. My favorite clients were never the ones that we step in on day one and it's a rosy arrangement. I like the clients that we stumbled, we learned, we iterated, and it took not just like the first week to build that relationship. It took time and effort, and it gets to a much deeper level. That's what those people who challenge you as your board of advisors should be able to do. Then it's an accountability measure, right? You know what I mean? I love to let people know that board of advisors, you should build them, your annual recap at the year-long mark every single year about what you've accomplished, but it should be forward pointing to where you're looking to go next. And I think that ties into another tool that I like to use in my energy coaching that I pair with Ikigai, which is called an Odyssey plan. And an Odyssey plan comes out of some fantastic Stanford professors. And it's this idea of looking 5 to 10 years in the future and laying out 3 options. The first option being everything you're doing remains consistent. The second option is the first option just disappears. What's the alternative? And then the third option is no constraints, no limitations. And it tends to work out when you pair that Ikigai, that vision exercise, with that future vision. It's not the exact roadmap to get to, right? You know what I mean? But it's directionally giving you the idea of how you can sit in the center of where your Ikigai drives you. And then what's the goal in the future? And it's typically with that Odyssey plan, not one A, B, or C, not 1, 2, or 3. It's some amalgamation of the 3 and it ends up where people go. That's a transformative way. And then that leads to building the systems and then the smaller goals that you need to accomplish to get there. With writing a book or doing anything from an entrepreneur standpoint, I like to remind people there are a few things that level set every single human on this planet. One is that we all only have 24 hours in the day. And then the second thing that comes with that is, imagine you're Michelangelo, the famous Italian sculptor, and you just got dropped a 2-ton, brick of marble in front of you. Think about how many hundreds of thousands of chisel marks it takes to take that block of marble and turn it into a beautiful statue. That resilience is a huge piece of the puzzle there.
Yeah, that's so powerful and so well said. It is the carving away at the marble to bring out what's really inside. And that's really what you're doing when you're writing. You're carving away the stuff so the truth comes to fruition. And then I feel like that's what all great books do. That's what all great authors do. And then it's our mission to get it out there as best way we can. So your your thoughts around marketing are very powerful, and you have to do it. Everyone has to do it their own way. What's one thing that is that became like sort of your favorite thing having launched a book now?
I think it's a little masochistic, of course. I actually loved going through the editing part of the puzzle. I loved, pulling out the filler words, pulling out the words that are just, they're not real words. That was such a tactical, surgical level of execution. And I actually really enjoyed and was driven to finish that process. I'd love to package that up. And, that's nothing that's recreatable in a lot of other places, but that gave me a lot of self-satisfaction to go through that process. And ultimately again, I realized, having read the book 5 times, visually, having read the book out loud to myself 5 times, having it published, then going to record the audiobook, I still found 3 errors in the book, right? Nothing is truly ever perfect, even no matter how many times you go through it. And that is true of every single author in the world.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, Adam, it's been an absolute privilege just having you on the show today, my friend. I've learned a lot. If you're out there, get the book, Make Your Own Glass Half Full. It's full of optimistic insights of how to see yourself, your work, and who surrounds you. Adam, thank you so much for being on the show, my friend. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's been a huge pleasure, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure.